Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney with you from the WELT studios in Fort Wayne on this Friday, September 20th. The IndyCar off-season has officially begun, but we still have a race to recap as we wrap up the season. Alex Palou, your 2024 champion, Colton Herta gets his first oval win. We have silly season news. We have FBI investigations. The off-season is officially here.
Yes, and it is here with a bang. That's for sure.
No doubt. All right, well, let's get started. So we'll start with the Music City GP presented by Gainbridge, the Big Machine Music City GP presented by Gainbridge at Nashville Superspeedway. Colton Herta, first career oval win. Alex Palou wins the championship, finishes in 11th. All the drama was sucked out of this race early because Will Power had loose lap belts. That was like, on lap 13, I believe?
We haven't seen that in a while, have we?
No. The last time I can recall this happening in a race was A.J. Allmendinger in the 2013 Indy 500 when he was driving for Penske for a handful of races that season after his suspension from NASCAR. So that sucked the air out of the championship fight, but the fight for the win certainly made up for the lack of the title bout.
Did you find it refreshing that we didn't have to focus on points as they run for 206 laps? Because what was it, 35 laps in when it happened to Will Power? I was already like, oh, this is going to be a long race talking about the championship the whole time. Once that was out the window, thankfully, we didn't have that shoved down our throat constantly.
I thought the second place points as they run was more interesting anyway because of how close that was.
Yeah, and kudos to MEC for even putting up some points as they run for the leader circle as well.
Yes.
Which was what I wanted to see.
Yes, and we had Pietro Fittipaldi getting in. We had Juncos Hollinger in the 78. It was driven by Connor Daly getting in. We had Stingray Robb and the Foyt 41, and then the two Dale Coyne Racing entries come up short.
Which is not ideal for a team already starving for money. We saw it with the revolving doors of those rides this year. Missing out on that $2 million is already putting Dale Coyne behind the eight ball for 2025.
Absolutely. So we know they will look for some drivers with funding in terms of Coyne. We also know what Foyt's going to look like. We'll get to that in silly season news after we recap this race. But all in all, I think the racing on track was outstanding, better than I think we could have expected. The alternate tire kind of seemed like a gimmick going in. I don't know if that really changed a whole lot. It seemed like the drivers preferred the primaries.
The only thing that really affected is because you had to run both compounds when you decided to run that alternate tire.
And that you had to run two sets.
Correct,
of
two
alternates.
sets. And if you timed it right to where there was a caution, of which we only had, 3, then it would be advantageous. But I don't know if it added that much, quite frankly, to the show. And thankfully, I don't really think we needed it with how this race was run.
No, I don't think so either. I think it was trying to cover their bases where it seemed like we'd have no passing, but outside of Iowa, IndyCar nailed the ovals this year, which our apologies. I mean, we thought after Iowa it was going to be a disaster at Gateway and Milwaukee and Nashville, and this was some of the best oval racing I think we've seen in IndyCar outside the Indy 500. I don't know how far you have to go back. I mean, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years?
And especially for this race because it's so unlike any other oval on the schedule.
It's a concrete oval. I mean, they don't have that.
Mile and a third oval. And it's the biggest oval outside of Indianapolis that they race on. So you felt like, well, they figured it out for Gateway. You feel like Gateway, Milwaukee, pretty similar in terms of size, but Nashville Superspeedway is much different and bigger. And you felt like, man, are they going to be able to get it right? As you mentioned too, that concrete too, and the tire deg on concrete as opposed to asphalt. But kudos to IndyCar, kudos to Firestone for getting it right and making sure that the Iowa weekend, as bad as it was an anomaly for oval racing for the 2024 season.
So let's get into our three things. And I guess my first takeaway we just kind of discussed. And to me, it's that IndyCar found the fix, whether it's with tires, whether it's with downforce settings. and they didn't even have a full field test at Nashville Superspeedway, but they found the fix to make the oval racing phenomenal after the disaster that was the Hy-Vee IndyCar weekend at Iowa.
Just a great job. And you really had to deliver this weekend. We always kind of say that the pressure's on at every single one of these ovals because you want them to succeed. Gateway, we say, well, you don't want to go away from Gateway. We can't afford to have a stinker. Then you go, well, Milwaukee's a huge weekend because IndyCar's going back. It has to be a good show. And then Nashville, where you're going, okay, it's not downtown. It's on the Superspeedway, closing out the season. You can't have a stinker here. And IndyCar delivered at every single one of those stops to make sure we didn't have any stinkers. And it was very impressive in what IndyCar was able to do. It's a very racy track. I think we'll talk too about the crowd. I think the crowd exceeded my expectations.
Yes.
And could this, I mean, I know that the eventual goal is to get back to the street course, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, but who's to say till then, this race can't grow from here, and the on-track product can only help that growth.
Yes, and one of our listeners I know in Rate the Race had posed the question, I think it was Steve, asking, is there a chance they do the oval and the street course if the street course doesn't need to come back? And my initial thought was no, but then you look at it, and if you have, one be the season finale and the other be way early in the season, which you can do, you could have this race in, say, late March, early April, and fill one of those open gaps on the schedule. Maybe that's a possibility. You're going to draw different crowds.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the big thing. Do we know that for sure? How many people made the trek that have gone to previous Nashville Grand Prix, Music City Grand Prix, and made the trek out 45 minutes to the Superspeedway? We don't have that information. Maybe we'll get it in terms of where they're, exit polling or sending surveys to those that attended. I'll be interesting to see that. Are these 50% new fans that came out that hadn't been to the Grand Prix downtown? Is it 70% people that went to the Grand Prix and then trekked out to the oval? I think that is a big question that needs to be answered before we start considering could this market sustain 2 races over the course of the season.
And I think the assumption, at least that I had for Milwaukee and same for Nashville on the oval in particular, is that the bulk of the fans are coming from the Indianapolis area to these events. But I guess I'm not so sure anymore because of the crowds we saw at both events across 3 races.
And the thing is, too, it goes back to Scott Borchetta, who did a phenomenal job in marketing this event despite the move. You'd have to look at Scott Borchetta and say, would he want to do that investment for 2 races over the course of a season and not just one? I think that's the starting point. If Scott Borchetta's like, yeah, I'm open to doing this twice a year as opposed to once a year, then maybe you have something. But he is a guy that has spared no expense to first hype up the Music City Grand Prix downtown and then at Nashville Superspeedway. He is the linchpin for all of this. And if he's a guy that says, I don't want to do this twice, then you're kind of stuck with just one race. But I'm fine with it. If the crowds are what we saw on Sunday and they can only grow from there, I think it's a burgeoning event for IndyCar in the short term and potentially the long term.
Now they just got to find a way to fix the oval racing at Iowa, which they're not gonna. Yes. They're not gonna repave the track. NASCAR probably will put the resin down again. You're just gonna have to find a workaround, and hopefully IndyCar can do that. At least my hope is maybe change the time slots a little bit, tweak with it a little bit, so you can get more of a true night race for the Saturday, and then start earlier in the afternoon on the Sunday race so that it warms up and makes the track slippier, right? Yes.
Slippier.
More slippy. I'm not sure. But it changes the makeup of the track and track temperatures. But all in all, Nashville, I think, from a racing standpoint, so far exceeded my expectations, and that's my first takeaway.
Yeah, and who's to say that IndyCar and Firestone hasn't already learned what didn't work at Iowa and what they need to do next year based on what they did at ovals the rest of the season.
Well, and the other thing that we have to remember, Iowa was the first oval weekend for the hybrid unit added into the car. So that was a new challenge. It was an unknown, whereas they at least had more data to go off of for Gateway and Milwaukee and Nashville. What's your first takeaway?
Well, let's talk about the championship winner in Alex Palou. Now 3 championships at age 27. In comparison, Scott Dixon didn't win his 3rd championship till age 33. So a 6-time champion in Scott Dixon. We presented the question on Twitter this week about how many championships can Alex Palou win in IndyCar over his career. Of course, it's predicated on, does he eventually at some point go to Formula One? Does he race into his 40s in IndyCar? Does he, who knows? But it is a topical discussion because of the dominance we've seen 3 and 4 years now for Alex Palou, and got it done. And in true Alex Palou fashion this past weekend, Power had his issues with his belts, but Palou, you saw him in the picture a couple times. He stayed out of trouble. He made some moves, finished 11th, and won a championship. And you look at this guy, and I still just don't feel like he's getting the attention that he should. 3 championships in 4 years. Have we seen a streak like that since
Dario?
Since Dario. Did he win 3 and 4?
2007, 9, 10, 11. So 4 and 6.
5. 4 and 6 is he? 7,
8,
9, 10, 11.
Yeah.
So that it's been 10, 15 years.
But for Dario, I guess that was at the end of his career. He had challenged for a championship in 99 in kart and lost on a tiebreaker to Montoya.
Right.
But he was a solid driver. He had some injuries in between there. He came on to the end of his career. Alex Palou has been strong from the gate. And I guess that's the part that's most impressive to me, is that he went from 1 year at a coin ride, gets lucky that there's availability at Ganassi because Rosenquist leaves to go to McLaren, and he makes the most of it. Wins his first race with Ganassi, and he's never looked back. And I think his consistency, this was not a dominant championship. He won 2 races. He did win the thermal challenge, but this was not the dominant kind of championship like he had last year. But he's just so consistent, and just 4 finishes outside the top 10. Colton Herta also had 4 outside the top 10 as well. This championship, I think, would have been a lot closer. There's a lot of what ifs that we can get into. Like if Scott McLaughlin was not DQ'd at St. Pete, I believe he would have won the championship. Is that correct?
Where he finished, yes.
Yeah.
And I think another what if that I think is Murderhawk brought it up, I think, is if Colton Herta hadn't gotten out of the seat at the 500, which at the time was not a good idea for him, because he could have just been restarted and got to the pit road, he could have potentially won the championship based on where he could have finished the 500. So a lot of what ifs, but in the end, Alex Palou makes it happen. And just think about this, Caleb, when we had this guy come into the series in 2020, and we looked it over and okay, he's coming from Super Formula. I mean, he's done some Formula 4, he's done some Formula 3. He's never won a championship in any of those, and did some a handful of races in Formula 2. Like when we talk about guys coming into the series and how heralded they are, Alex Palou was not it. He came in and said, he had some success in Japan in Super Formula, but hasn't really, been piling up championships yet. Here he is with 3 championships in 4 years since joining Chip Ganassi in 2021. It's just been absolutely dominating performance by Palou, something we hadn't seen in his career up till now.
And another case of why Dale Coyne Racing is important for the series, develops these drivers, gives them their first opportunity, and then Palou goes on to have success. I think to answer your question about why there's not more hype about Palou, I think one, just his personality. He's a pretty laid-back, family-oriented guy. He's a racer. He's well-respected in the paddock, but he's not flashy, and that's fine. To me, I view him as Scott Dixon 2.0. Great driver. He's probably never going to get the attention or the accolades till later on in his career. Like we've seen that with Dixon the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
Where everyone's like, oh, he's the GOAT, all that. He keeps checking off boxes, most career podiums, more and more wins. 1 championship away from tying AJ Foyt, which who knows if we're going to see that. I mean, Dixon had a down season for him, finishing in 6th, to put it in perspective, and yet he still won 2 races this year. So I think with Palou, it's just his nature, and I think when we look at it 5, 10, even 15 years from now, if he's still racing at that point, he'll kind of be on that Scott Dixon level in terms of accomplishments. Now, do I expect him to win 6 championships? No. I think 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I also think with him, he doesn't win as many races, but he's so consistent. In fact, he's better at Scott Dixon's own game of getting the best finish available out of a car and doing what needs to be done. So very impressive what he did this season. The fact that he won the title despite not winning since June 23rd at Laguna Seca, which that's still true for Max Verstappen, having not won since that date either. I think it says a lot. And we saw Colton Herta, Scott McLaughlin, Will Power all give runs at Palou, but they couldn't get it done. You have to be consistent. And go figure, Palou's some of his worst finishes came in the final 2 races of the season. Obviously the battery issue at the second race in Milwaukee, and then Nashville finishing 11th, where he was just trying to get through the race. After what happened with Power early, just make sure he finished the race, and that's exactly what he did.
He did, and when asked, and Alex Palou play the what if game, but if he goes to any other team other than Chip Ganassi, is he in the position that he is? Because when he's asked who he credits for his success, it's Scott Dixon and Dario Franchitti. And, he's quoted on Beyond the Flag. It said, in terms of talking about Scott Dixon and what he absorbs, he says everything: how to think, how to prepare the car, how to push, how to go faster, how to go slower. When you have to go slower, he said, I'm still learning every day that he goes out on track, and I go out on track and I can compare stuff to him. So to have the resources that Alex Palou has, he had the innate ability, but then to come into a situation, you always talk right place, right time, right? And Alex Palou was the right person at the right time to come in and be a sponge and learn from 2 of the greatest drivers in IndyCar history, in Scott Dixon and Dario Franchitti. And it has absolutely been huge. And you kind of have to look at it. Even if he went to Penske, does he have as much success because of how much he has been able to lean on and learn from Dixon and Franchitti?
All right, let's go to my number 2 on this race. And how about Colton Herta getting his first oval win, finishing second in the championship after the strong start to the year and then the disaster of Indy GP qualifying and a great finish after that, and then the disaster at the Indy 500, the mess at Detroit. You're thinking, did he just completely blow away his chances of contending for not only the championship but a decent points finish? Well, he rebounded down the stretch, only 2 finishes outside the top 5 since Detroit. Road America, he was 6. So after Road America, 2 finishes outside the top 5. So he was really good. First oval win, 3 poles, 2 wins on the year. This was a bounce-back year that Colton Herta needed after, 2 consecutive 10th place finishes in the points. And we always forget, he's 24 years old. But to have Herta and Pato fighting for race wins, I think we've been clamoring for that as far as the young guns, so to speak, coming up for several years. Well, we're seeing it happen now, and maybe this is the season that gives Herta the confidence to get back in the title fight consistently again. I mean, we saw him strong in 2020, weird season.
Yeah.
Didn't win a race, I don't think, that year.
No, he won Mid-Ohio, I think.
Mid-Ohio, okay.
But 2021, he was solid.
Yeah, and then it kind of fell off.
Right?
So it was a great bounce-back year for him. He was one of the other drivers with just 4 finishes outside the top 10 on the year. So I don't know. I think I'm really impressed because we kind of harped on him a lot earlier in the season. The way he answered and closed, I think, was very impressive. I mean, you look at his bad results. Obviously, the Indy 500, he had the spin, should not have gotten out of the car. Detroit, it's raining, bad strategy call. Iowa won. He ill-timed pit stop. Still finished 11th. Was on pole there. And then Milwaukee, tire coming off out of the pits. I mean, these are simple fixes. These are not things where he just had a dog of a car.
Right.
He was usually fast from the get-go, and I think it's not only a big bounce back for him, but also the team to finish second in the championship and beat Penske.
It is, and I think you look at it and expand it a little, is Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward, who just so happen to be battling in this race, showed signs this year of being able to potentially take another step forward and be a championship contender. Colton Herta, like you mentioned, couple of wins, a second place finish. You look at Pato O'Ward being able to win 3 races, still had his ups and downs. Gateway, Milwaukee 2, for example, kind of threw any chance away that he had of finishing in the top 3 in the championship. But We saw him kind of break through, and a couple years ago we thought it was coming and it didn't. Could we be seeing signs that 2025 is the year for both of those guys? And at least in terms of Colton Herta, I think there's plenty of optimism in that regard heading into the offseason.
Yeah, and beating Joseph Newgarden in points. For Herta's case, beating Will Power, Scott McLaughlin, Newgarden, Dixon, Pato. I mean, he just basically put himself back up on that top tier again in this series.
Yes, absolutely. And it's now some other questions with Alex Palou that haven't reared their heads, though, is in terms of, okay, can he win on an oval? He's still winning championships. Now the thing with Colton Herta is now that he's got that oval victory, he can kind of put that behind him and maybe settle in a little bit more and get some more oval wins in 2025. So it was a really good ending to the season for Colton Herta. He had both of his wins came in the top last 6 races in Toronto. Mm-hmm. So finishing the season strong, and we'll see if it carries over into 2025.
And I think Herta and McLaughlin both have to feel like they have a lot of momentum going into next year, because McLaughlin proved to be one of the best oval drivers in the series this year.
Yes. Who would have thunk, right?
No one would have thought that going into the season. What's your number 2?
Looking at what is my number 2? Let's talk about, let's see. It's tough not to look at Rahal again. And I just, once again, nothing on an oval. I mean, nothing. You had Rahal finishing 23rd, Fittipaldi 21st, Lundgaard 19th, all of them at least 2 laps down. I don't know. We're going to talk more about RLL and their interesting week coming up, but it just seems like they continue to be miles away. We talked about teams showing their mettle this year, maybe raising the level. We talked about Foyt. We talked about Colton Herta and potentially Andretti, with Herta being able to raise their level. Pato Award with McLaren next year, heading into 2025. It is hard for me to find any type of silver lining for RLL right now, and they finished the season with another dud.
They were a disaster on ovals all season, and Christian Lundgaard somehow made the best of these oval races for the most part, but they were just non-factors. And for Graham Rahal, who's been a solid top 10 driver in the series for a long time, to finish 19th in points,
right?
And to not have a single top 5 recorded across the season for the first time in his entire career, I believe.
Right.
It's not the drivers, okay? It's the engineering, it's the development, whatever's going on behind the scenes, it's not working with that team.
No. And I don't know if it's top down. I don't know. I don't know where this team even starts, to be honest. Did you? Is it Bobby? Is it engineering? I have no idea. It's just been brutal.
It has been brutal, and hopefully they can fix things for next year, and we'll see who fills those seats. I mean, obviously Lundgaard's gone, Rahal's back, and then we probably do not expect Pietro Fittipaldi to be back, but we'll see. That depends on sponsorship, and it seems like 5 Hour Energy likes working with him because they added more races as the season went on with Fittipaldi. But yeah, they have a long ways to go this offseason and a lot to figure out.
Yeah, unfortunately. What's your number 3?
My number 3. So when I look at this race, I guess we already talked about kind of it's really hard. Like, we talked about the style of the race. I mean, we had great side-by-side battles, right? Herta's pass for the win was outstanding over Pato Award, using Stingray Robb as a pick. I thought for sure Herta was going to crash, but I rewatched it, and he did the same pick move earlier in the race, so it makes sense. Newgarden and McLaughlin side-by-side touching. That was fun. I'm going to go with...
What you got?
I don't know. This is tough. I'm going to go with Ferrucci. Let's go with Ferrucci.
Okay.
It had a grid penalty, so started a bit further back. Finished 6th. Best Foyt season for a Foyt driver since 2002. He's now officially back with the team, multi-year deal for next year, pairing with David Malukas. if you would have told me going into the start of this season that an AJ Foyt driver would finish top 10 in points, beat not one but two McLaren drivers, beat all the Rahal drivers, beat both Meyer-Shank entries, beat an Andretti entry, I would have said you were nuts. And Santino Ferrucci did just that, finishing 9th overall in points.
How about that? And you felt like the season eventually, the positive vibes, okay, something was going to happen where they were going to drop back down to earth, right? You felt like this can't continue all season?
Yeah, well, you thought, well, they're doing well, and he's not really known as a good road and street course driver, so he's punching above his weight. And
right.
You thought, well, there are a lot of ovals coming up, but you're also waiting for something to go wrong.
Correct.
And that simply didn't happen. He gets a pole at Portland. He finished the year 4 straight top 10s, 4th, and 6th to close out Milwaukee and Nashville. I mean, he was outstanding down the stretch. And
absolutely.
You look at kind of the misses that they had. They were caught up in Toronto in that crash. Indy GP, I think they had a mechanical. Long Beach, I can't recall what happened there. But overall, this was a consistent, solid run for a guy that we knew had talent, but it was the consistency and the ability to show speed on tracks outside of ovals that impressed me the most with him this year.
No, definitely. And I think you look at him and the confidence that this team gained, I think is bigger than pretty much anything. More than anything, is knowing that they can handle over the course of the entire season what we saw them do. And when you're going into races and you're not approaching them like we're going to be lucky to finish 20th. And now you're going, yeah, we have legitimate shots to finish top 10s week after week after week. When you do that, and it raises the level, and now you're seeing them with David Malukas in the fold, and now, as we'll get to in a little bit, combining together in Indianapolis instead of 2 shops, one in Indy, one in Texas. It is just, it continues to be positive. Quite frankly, I never thought we'd get to this point with Foyt. Did you? I thought it was just eventually just go away, and credit to Larry Foyt. Credit to everybody involved. Credit to Ferrucci as well to get to this point. It is absolutely shocking the turnaround we've seen from AJ Foyt Racing.
It is. This is night and day, a different team, even from last year. Last year they were great at the Indy 500, but they were MIA the rest of the schedule. This year they were consistently fighting for top 10s and top 5s with Santino Ferrucci, and they were a storyline throughout the year. I mean, they were a storyline on the broadcast, and not for mechanicals and crashes and things like that. No, they were a legitimate storyline as far as being competitive and having the opportunity for race wins. And I guess the step for next year, you mentioned it, they're going to combine forces and just have everything in Indy, which is another thing we thought would never happen. We thought that was the one thing holding them back from truly being competitive. And we'll see the dividends that pays, because I mean, Chip Ganassi's releasing a lot of crew, going from 5 to 3. And yes, he still has his lights entries, but he lost his IMSA program too. So there's a lot of talent on the market for teams to go after, whether it's, Prima or Foyt with that move, or other teams just trying to shuffle their crew lineups. And Foyt has an opportunity to take a massive step forward, especially if the rumor that we're hearing about David Malukas and how he got that ride, that was really Roger Penske kind of had his hand in that. And then Nathan Brown had a really interesting theory that he posted. So congrats to him. He's on paternity leave as his wife had a baby, so he did not cover Nashville. But I think the thing that's fascinating is, so Brown had said that Bobby Rahal and July both had every intention to continue. That was with Hy-Vee, because there's a lot of talking of Rossi. Does he get that ride? But there's been talks of links between Hy-Vee and AJ Foyt Racing recently, which that's obviously a huge change, and that would be a big sponsor.
Well, that's the thing is, if we talk about RLL, if you're terrible, sponsors don't want to be part of terrible, particularly a sponsor that has the amount of activation that Hy-Vee does. They don't want to be part of a loser. And it's not just 1 year and then they're checking out. Like, this is multiple years of ineptitude with RLL. Eventually, sponsors
I think
look
they
somewhere
did
else or just
just
drop
enough last year with Lundgaard getting win, but ironically, Hy-Vee wasn't the primary sponsor in the
Right.
car.
They couldn't
at
even
Toronto.
be part of it.
So go figure.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not surprising if you don't perform and other teams do, particularly teams that haven't had a lot of success of late, like Foyt, then all of a sudden that becomes more of a draw. And it's been a combination of things. Make no mistake, the partnership with Penske has meant a lot, but I already felt like this team was going in a better direction before that. That's just been another aspect of their improvement, and Penske has definitely benefited as well at Indianapolis, partnering with Foyt.
All right, your number 3?
My number 3 overall, you look at, let's talk about Will Power, because I was waiting for, we've seen a couple instances this week or this year when Will Power reverted back to classic Will Power. And by God, we love classic Will Power, right? We love to see him.
Entertaining.
Fun,
volatile.
We didn't see that on Sunday when his lap belts came undone. Old Will Power, I could see just going irate, particularly when he was sitting there in the pits and they were working lap after lap after lap after lap, trying to get those belts fastened back. But he was just low key. He go with the flow. He didn't go out back on track and have an attitude to where he just needed to demolition derby everybody with the frustration. It was a very mature drive out of Will Power, and it was very pleasant to see. Sometimes I wish we had more old school Will Power, but we get just enough sometimes to enjoy it. And I was really impressed with how he handled that, because something completely out of his control, didn't really have anybody to blame. Maybe I mean, it's just one of those things, and I think he handled it extremely well. It buried any chance he possibly had to win a championship, but the old veteran wily Will Power handled it so much better than classic Will Power.
This to me felt like it's not meant to be kind of thing. When that happens, it's so beyond your control. It's like, okay, it's not meant to be. You move on. I think that's how he handled it. I think he was gracious in defeat, congratulating Palou and going about his business. And he honestly didn't seem so upset, or he wasn't angry in the post-race interview. It was just like, this is a fluke thing. This happens. You move on. But I think the Will Power we've seen the last couple of years is very different. I think that's why he's been more successful the latter stages of his career. Not that he wasn't successful before, but I think he's found a mental edge that he just didn't have prior. And that's been talked about ad nauseum, of course.
Definitely. But it was on display once again in the season finale. So I thought it was a gracious drive despite the circumstances for Will Power. Could have handled it a heck of a lot worse. Didn't. Still finished 4th in the championship. Still won 3 races. So can't feel bad for Will Power. But the 10th and the 24th of the final 2 races really decided it. And he'll come back and be ready again for another run, but it just wasn't to be, like you said, in 2024 for him.
So some other notes on Nashville before we move forward to silly season news. 653 on-track passes, 237 for position, 117 in the top 10, 42 passes in the top 5, all Nashville Superspeedway IndyCar records, which we've seen this consistently on oval tracks to close out the season. Of note, once again, we go another year with a driver not winning, or with a driver winning the Indy 500, not winning the championship. Last to do that, Dario Franchitti in 2010. Also, Chad 200 with this note. First season since 2015, no driver won 2 consecutive races.
Right.
Which was kind of something we talked about a few weeks ago. I thought, when's someone going to go on a roll? And we never saw it. It was consistency.
Right. I mean, we talked about nobody putting together 3 straight podiums until Scott McLaughlin did it with 2 Iowas and Mid-Ohio. He was the only one throughout the season to put together 3 consecutive 3rd place or better finishes. So, yeah, in that respect, you can say parity, or there was lack of dominance from one particular driver. Either or, it was an entertaining season.
And Flava Flav was there.
Yeah, he was.
With Will Power.
How about that?
So that's a look at Nashville and the season.
Is it me, or does it not seem like Will Power has good drives when Flava Flav's there? I don't think he's won a race.
I don't think so. I mean, like there. Detroit, I don't think he had a good day. So, yeah, maybe he's bad luck. I don't know. I hate to say that. I'd be curious if someone has the stats on this because I don't know off the top of my head. So we go from the championship race and shift into silly season and a lot of announcements. Felix Rosenqvist, probably the only good thing that happened for him on Sunday was the announcement he got a contract extension with Meyer Shank Racing. He'll be with the team through 2026, I believe, a 2-year extension. So good for him. Tire blew up. Not good for him in the race. He looked pretty competitive. Other announcements, no surprise, Callum Ilott announced at Prima for 2025. All expectation is that the other car will be filled by Robert Schwartzman, who's tested in an IndyCar, I believe, with Ganassi previously, I think last year. So we know that Ilott will be in one of those Prima entries. Not sure the number on that. I haven't seen anything on that. Also of note, Marcus Armstrong confirmed in the 66 for Meyer Shank Racing, as we expected. That not a surprise.
Nope.
We had Santino Ferrucci confirmed as well. So that's the silly season update as far as confirmations in the last week. Other notes with silly season, Jamie Chadwick targeting a part-time IndyCar campaign for 2025, looking at 6 to 8 races. I'm a bit surprised by this.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping. I just don't feel like she's ready yet. Do you?
I feel the same. Now, if she's still going to compete full-time in lights, I guess I'm cool with that. But, yeah, I'm a bit surprised.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do your opportunities when you can, for sure. I mean, we'll see how the test goes. I feel like she's still a year away from doing that. I think a test is great for her to do.
Yeah, and her test is coming up 10 days from now, September 30th. And then also joining her at that test, Chip Ganassi Racing is going to test Felipe Drugovich, who, again, it's an interesting move by Ganassi.
I mean, what's the play here?
I don't know.
You're full, right?
Yeah, one would assume.
You're not asking an F2 champion to run lights, are you?
No, certainly not. So they will test at Barber, both those drivers, on September 30th, and Mike Hull telling Racer that they have another driver that they could test, particularly more for their Indy Lights program they're going to do. This one's interesting because this is a driver, it seems like the Brazilian would have wound up in IndyCar perhaps this past season or next season. He's on the radar, kind of like with Logan Sargent, who was at Nashville, been on the radar for a few years. You just wonder if that ever happens. Like, is he... I was thinking this the other day. There was a driver who was set to race for Ganassi who ended up going to F1 with then Toro Rosso, and then that's when Ed Jones filled in. And I can't think of his name. You know what I'm talking about, though, right? This kind of feels like one of those situations where they kind of have this guy on contract, and they'll see if something works out. But, I mean, Drugovich is talented, and F1 kind of has the problem, has had it for a few years, that IndyCar is starting to have, where young talent, they're just not getting opportunities.
Correct. You just don't have an avenue for them. And maybe it's even a test that maybe Drugovich finds a home somewhere else, but he just gets an IndyCar test. I don't know what the play is here. I guess you never know what could happen, but when you're down to 3 drivers, I don't know what the plan would be for Drugovich unless he had to sub in for somebody for whatever reason. I don't know, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will see. And again, he's not running lights. I'm completely throwing that off the table.
There's just no way.
There's no way that's what they're going to do. Also of note, Catherine Legge sat down with James Hinchcliffe, and seems like she's going to be returning to Dale Coyne Racing and potentially a lot more races next year. I guess would be ELF. That partnership, which really grew, it was just an Indy 500 thing, really grew throughout the season, and seems like she's going to have a more of an opportunity next year with Coyne. So that's something to follow as well. And then that's really it as far as the silly season goes. We talked about Ganassi downsizing and the talent now on the market because of that. Yeah, all these things expected. I guess everyone's still waiting. Where does Alexander Rossi go?
The great question. And anytime he posts something on Twitter, everybody's got to psychoanalyze it.
Yes, he's just messing with us all.
I feel the longer we go, the worse it is for Alexander Rossi in terms of where he lands.
Yes.
Is that how you feel?
I think so. I mean, Shank was probably his best option, and when that didn't happen, and it makes sense because Armstrong essentially farmed out with that Ganassi partnership now with Shank for 2025, you expected that. Once that was rumored, you like, okay, that probably ended Rossi's shot there, and the fact that there's rumors that AutoNation could scale back or go away, it just really hurts his chances. I mean, to me, his best option is Rahal. But I don't know.
Ugh. Is that? I mean, and we just talked about how bad Rahal's been. It's just, I don't know. I feel he's never going to say it internally. You have to be like, as longer this goes, going, yeah, I probably should have taken that 1-year deal from McLaren.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not looking good.
No, it is certainly not, and we'll see how this plays out. Not feeling good about his chances in terms of landing maybe the ride that he thought he would get compared to McLaren.
Yes, I agree. Again, he held himself in very high esteem, and that's good. You want to stick up for yourself, but at the same time, you have one win in 5 years. Okay, so the market's not going to be there.
No, and the market speaks for itself. I think that's just kind of the reality, right? The market is going to do those things. Now let's get to all the craziness of whatever's happening at Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing.
Just when you thought the only issues were on track.
Yes. So we knew there was an FBI raid at the Rahal shop in Zionsville, so in the Indy area. Didn't really have a lot of details in the beginning. And then Marshall Pruitt of Racer.com, the allegations center around a former Andretti employee who's in senior engineering. FBI alleged employees within the Rahal team to leave their computers and related electronic devices in place, gather their belongings, and depart the building. As agents began an investigation, the alleged transfer of intellectual property from Andretti to Rahal, that's at play. Also, the FBI, according to Pruitt, alleged to have visited the Andretti shop in August to look for proof of possible IP-related improprieties. So no comment from Andretti on that. Rahal team just put out a simple statement on everything. Nothing too crazy as far as the statement goes, what you would expect on this. We're cooperating with officials on the investigation. Given that this is an ongoing investigation, limited in what information we can share right now, but we intend to provide additional information as soon as we can. So
our thought is an employee who was at Andretti took some information or whatever from Andretti that he shouldn't have. Is that kind of, now is it cyber related? Is it computer related? And that's why the FBI is involved, I guess, maybe?
I don't know. And
did he take some floppy disks he shouldn't have taken? Is that what you're saying? Some thumb drives?
What's interesting is, this is a federal investigation.
Correct. Which is not like a regular police investigation. So our thing is, why is it a federal investigation? And maybe that's going back to cyber crimes or cyber crimes, more FBI. I don't know. I don't know whose jurisdiction it is. It's just weird. It's one thing when you say, okay, the cops stop by and, ask questions. It's another thing to say FBI raided, your offices. That's kind of like, oh, okay, really?
And with everything that happened this season, to have this happen, 3 days after the season finale, it's intriguing and probably not the attention you want going into the off season, as you have one, if not two, open driver seats to fill. But there's not a whole lot to go off of with this, but that's what we know at the moment, and I'm sure we'll get more information in due time.
Yes, I don't know. When you initially saw it, you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I feel like this is very much a individual investigation, not a RLL-wide investigation.
Yes, it seems to be centered on that individual, at least based on the information we have at this time. All right, so if you agree or disagree with us on our takes on Nashville, silly season, FBI raids, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free. You'll get emails for new episodes, any special announcements as well. You can also check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers there for you. Also, you can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. You can find us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Twitter /X, on Instagram, on Facebook, search for New Track Record. And as always, we welcome your questions, comments, rants, what have you, via email, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. And you can always download each episode for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, Pocket Cast, Overcast, CastBox, wherever you find your podcast, download and listen in for free. Okay, time for the mailbag. We start with Rate the Race. How would you rate Nashville?
I had it as a 7.5.
Okay. I was going to go 8.5 just because it exceeded my expectations.
Fair.
It had a great finish. There was a lull in the middle. There was more side-by-side racing than I would have expected. So I was entertained. Ironically, the listeners were pretty much in the middle of that. A 7.93.
Okay.
Was the Rate the Race rating.
I think anything around 7 to 8, 8.5 is fair. You can make a case for that.
But I thought it was entertaining. Also, we didn't get to this in Nashville. 160,000 fans for the 3-day weekend now. That number includes the event, the Hy-Vee pit stop competition and an event on Broadway.
Basically tells me anybody that walked by on Broadway was counted on Friday.
So 22,000 tickets sold at least for the race, perhaps more. A good starting point. Obviously, you want to build in year 2, and I think you gave a product that is worthy of building in year number 2. Let's see. TV rating. Not great. Not that this is a surprise, but the TV rating was very bad. Perhaps, was this the worst network TV rating? It
was the worst NBC IndyCar rating in, the 10 years that NBC was with IndyCar, or whatever it was.
Which, you go up against the NFL. I want to disagree with it, but this is just the reality as far as the TV rating goes. 483,000. Put it in perspective, IndyCar got more on USA for Milwaukee Race 2. And
every time we talk about this, people always want to bring up about going later in the season and, if you promote it more people. Consider this. In week 1 of the NFL season, the average amount of viewers for NFL games was 23 million. Average. You could multiply the marketing budget by 10 in IndyCar, and it's still not going to get a big number against the NFL. The NFL is a juggernaut, people. You can't go head-to-head with it. You can't even same day isn't going to be beneficial. It doesn't make any sense for IndyCar to try to go any deeper into the fall than it already does, in my opinion. Start earlier, I'm all for that, but go deeper, no.
Fill the gaps that you have early in the season, add a race in March, add a race in April, and then end it Labor Day weekend, which they're doing next year. Hopefully it's a night race on Sunday night. I think that would be cool. Like, say you start at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
You draw a big crowd. Your only competition is one college football game, and those are more regional fan bases. Yes, college football does get big numbers now compared to what it used to even a few years ago, but I think that's your opportunity. Problem is you're competing with NASCAR at Darlington that weekend usually.
Yeah.
So I don't know. To me, that's your best bet, and I think that's what will perhaps see with Fox to crown a champion in Nashville. But yeah, the TV rating's bad. And look, ideally you get to 20 races and you start either the same day as the Super Bowl, but like before, or you start the week in between where there's nothing going on, or the week after, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I mean, the week after is always
You're not going
Daytona.
to because of Daytona.
It's correct. The week after the Super Bowl is always Daytona, so that's kind of tough. But yeah, mid-February-ish to early September, I think, is fine for IndyCar. It doesn't have to go deeper into September. It doesn't have to go into October. Nobody's going to watch other than diehard IndyCar fans. And even then, I find it hard. Like last weekend, Saturday all day is college football. Sunday is all day NFL. I have to figure out, I think I finished the race on Tuesday. Like, priorities change. And to think that IndyCar should, throw more money at it and up the marketing budget and go into October, it makes zero sense. It is impossible to go against the NFL and get a good number.
It truly is. And that's just the reality of where we're at. Let's go to mailbag entries. A lot of people with thoughts on the Ferrucci Malukas lineup confirmed. Let's see. Mom 2X over 2002 said, so excited for this. They made amazing strides this season. Understatement. Lynn _ IndyCar trolling. Okay lineup. Still won't compete with the best team in the series, Chip Ganassi Racing. Poet Shevchenko said this team is going to be fearsome on ovals. Yes. It's going to be fun to watch. And I Am Analog said that's going to make for some interesting content. Yeah, Ferrucci admitted that Malukas was like the one guy in the paddock they've just simply not interacted.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I'm like, well, that's interesting. Not that they don't get along, but it's just fascinating.
Well, it's Marshall Pruitt, I think, pointed out in his mailbag, if Grosjean and Newgarden and Ferrucci had a party and invited all of the other drivers, they would get maybe 2 other drivers to show up. So Malukas is going to have to become fast friends with Ferrucci. Who do you think is there a one there? Is it a 1A, 1B?
That's a good question. I mean, experience-wise, it's Ferrucci. Raw speed, it's Malukas.
I mean, neither of them have a win, so it's not like you can do that.
Well, that's the other thing. It's like there's a lot of excitement, but they haven't won. Neither of them have won a race yet. Ferrucci's been competitive. He's competed for wins. Malukas has competed for a win, once or twice? Obviously, at Gateway a couple years ago. Yeah, that's the one thing where you have 2 kind of same level drivers. How's that dynamic work out?
I mean, neither of them, I think, even have a podium, do they?
Malukas has a couple oval podiums. Ferrucci was third at the Indy 500 last year.
That's right.
So they have podiums. But yeah, it's a fascinating lineup. Zaner _ Ridge asks, really like the idea of IndyCar in Adelaide. Seeing open wheel cars racing there once again would be amazing. Speaking of supercars, I think Bottas should go there. He already lives in Australia. I think would fit his lifestyle. Well, Bottas legitimately considers IndyCar if he doesn't get a ride. And it doesn't feel like a fallback for once. We talked about that last week.
Correct. Now, is it by the time he's, in terms of this year, for example, if he exhausts all chances in F1 for 2025, would it be too late to get an IndyCar ride for 2025? And especially a competitive one? Probably. But down the line, maybe 2026, could you see Valtteri Bottas in an IndyCar?
Perhaps, yeah. I think there are a few drivers that would be interesting either next year or the year after. I mean, obviously, in the immediate future, we're thinking Logan Sargent. Does he get a ride? But there are a lot of other interesting options moving forward that I think is fascinating in terms of from F1 to IndyCar, which I get people hate that, but there are a lot of good drivers. Also, this from Unlimited Slip DF. Except for the 500, it's been hard to enjoy oval racing in IndyCar recently. I found Milwaukee and Nashville this year to be absolutely outstanding. Perfectly sized and shaped courses for the series. Yes, I would agree. And it's nice that they're finally getting that again because the oval racing, it's seemingly been lacking for a bit.
Totally. And it feels just
outside the 500, of course.
Does it feel kind of like IndyCar's found, now Iowa wasn't a good one, but it's been good in the past.
Yes.
Does it feel like they've found their place in being at certain ovals that are not too big for them. I always felt like
they're mostly non-NASCAR owned ovals.
Well, that's the key thing. It's like it just feels like, okay, so you look at Iowa, and I'm looking more capacity wise with attendance. Like, Iowa's mid, Gateway's mid,
Milwaukee's mid, Nashville's mid.
It just feels
now
like
Gateway has room to grow, and IndyCar early on was drawing over 40,000 with the turn 1 stands, but the main grandstand is fine. That's the only one that has maybe a too big of a capacity for IndyCar currently.
Right. But they have NASCAR, so
yes,
it makes sense to have those seats. But it just kind of feels like IndyCar's in a good place with its ovals in terms of past or current competitiveness, reasonably decent crowds, and they're not NASCAR owned, at least the majority of them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, Iowa's the only one that's owned by NASCAR. So that's a positive for sure. And this from Historic Hot Laps talking about ovals. I'll be the first to say it. We need to always end the season on an oval. Sad that it's over for 2024, but at least it wasn't an Iowa repeat. The countdown to next season begins. I think ending on an oval was exciting for the fans. Chip Ganassi had some interesting comments saying, I don't want to mention any drivers' names, but they don't know the whole story of Roger Penske's management of IndyCar either. Okay, so just tell them, sit down and shut up. Worry about what you should be worrying about. So what driver is he referencing?
That's what I'm saying. So if he would have said owners, I'm saying, okay, Zach Brown and Michael Andretti mainly.
Yes.
But drivers, who's
I don't know.
Out of turn.
I have no idea. But, and I said this, team owner who dominates series championship nearly every year naturally sides with Penske. I mean, I guess what do you expect him to say? A couple of replies, Kojo617 saying, fair point, but with Ganassi losing the IMSA program, his only big series he races in is IndyCar. That plus the relationship with Roger, I'd expect him to say this. Yeah, he's out of NASCAR. He's now out of IMSA again. And then 100-67 just said, F you, Chip. And then Kojo adds, also can we bring him your thoughts on Zach Brown, specifically his comments on how he was put on a marketing committee, but has never received a call or anything about this committee and moving the needle forward in this area. Yeah, Zach Brown had a great letter that he posted on the McLaren social media, on the McLaren website for the team, basically kind of like a state of IndyCar address, something that we've not had from Roger Penske since taking over. And you can read all that, but he had some great stuff in there. There was even a dig that he took about the whole push to pass situation as well in there. But it's a great read, and he has a lot of great ideas. And his biggest one was he wants marketing spending up to $100 million, which is obviously F1 level.
And which obviously will not happen.
No, it will not happen, but that's the...
growth, yes.
These are the kind of steps that need to happen for IndyCar to really make a jump.
I think there are some realistic things that Zach Brown listed. I also believe there's some unrealistic things. But I do think that tackling some of these things, like let's say the marketing budget goes up $15 million. That'd be huge. It's not $100 million, but it'd be huge nonetheless. I think he makes a lot of good points. Probably Penske's not listening or reading it, but I think Zach, out of all of the owners, has the pulse of the series better than anyone that is willing to speak out. I'm not saying all the other owners don't have these opinions, but Zach Brown is in a position to call things how they are.
He is as powerful as Roger Penske because he runs McLaren organization and not just the IndyCar team. So he's on a power level, very powerful.
And he's 8 races away from winning a constructor's championship.
He's got to beat Ferrari too. I mean,
True.
Red Bull seemingly is out of it, but Ferrari is giving McLaren a run for the money. Also, did he tip off a new race? He said a return to Denver has been a long time coming. So is that coming in 2026?
I think that's highly probable.
And then also he said the absence of Watkins Glen which I found very funny after Mark Miles' comments, which dropped off the calendar a number of years ago, continues to leave a noticeable gap in the Northeast, which we should aim to fill. Yes, that's one of the big problems of IndyCar is you don't have a race in Texas at the moment, whether that's a street race in San Antonio or Dallas, whether it's at Texas Motor Speedway, whether it's at COTA, street race in Houston. You need a race somewhere there. You need something on the Northeast. Those are two big gaps, and then obviously Mexico being the other one. Those are the three gaps that IndyCar needs to fill.
I just don't get why, if IndyCar, and I'm not thrusting everything on IndyCar, but if there was proper promotion and activation at Watkins Glen, and you let it grow, give it a couple years, because remember, IndyCar wasn't there for 5 years, came back for 2, and then decided they were done.
Yeah, it was the fill-in for the Boston GP, which failed, and it was a track rental. They come in 2016 and 17, right, and then they were gone again.
Just never felt like they gave it a fair shot and properly approached it to grow it, because I have a hard time believing there's not a market in the Northeast, particularly with how people talk about it. When you look at other like facilities in terms of like the Glen, when you look at Mid-Ohio, that has become a huge RV and camping weekend. When you look at Road America, same thing. You could build the same thing at Watkins Glen. Am I wrong?
Oh, absolutely you could, and it'd be great on Labor Day weekend. I mean, people are there visiting the area lakes. I mean, is that the play? I don't know, but that seems to be something you could do. Now, obviously, it's not going to be Labor Day weekend because of how the schedule's set up, and they're not going to go past that date. But obviously, he also highlights how great the Fox TV deal is, and having a partner like Fox on board is massive, and we can't understate that. And we're going to ignore all the nonsense with venue sports for now because it's not really at play. But he also mentioned having more than one practice session on Fridays of road and street course events, which I always find it so silly that that's all they have.
Well, I mean, at events particularly where you have a lot of stuff going on, I can see that. I mean, he's comparing it to Formula One, where if Formula One doesn't share, there's not much going on around a Formula One event. F2 maybe, F3. Yeah. There's a lot more going on when you talk about St. Pete and Long Beach and stuff like that. So I think it's easier said than done. I think at places where they should, but it also says something to consistency across your schedule when you're having one practice Friday, one practice Saturday, although IndyCar doesn't seem to have much consistency in that respect.
He also pushes for a new car. There's a lot of good stuff in this. It's beyond just the marketing budget aspect, but obviously brings up a lot of great points in where IndyCar needs to go. So I recommend you check that out. So we continue on with the mailbag, as that was kind of an aside on everything. Let's see what else we have, because we had a lot this week just because of, a lot going on. Okay, your poll question. Scott Dixon winning his third title at age 33, Palou 3 at 27. So the votes are in. 47% said 6 or more. Nearly 34% said 5 titles for Palou. Nearly 15% said 4, and 4% of you said just 3. CJ9 said, is there a chance he gets poached by F1? We thought that, and there have been rumors. I don't think so, because I think it would have already happened by now.
Yeah, although I think the more championships he wins, and more importantly, if he gets an Indianapolis 500 win, the more I could see Alex Palou wanting or looking to go to Formula One at some point.
Well, he may be looking, but is F1 looking for him? And
that's the thing. At 27,
yeah, that's
may as well
the problem.
Be 47, right?
Yeah, in F1 years, that's 40. So Aaron
point.
J. Richmond said Palou's success is more sustainable because it's not like he's winning all the time like Dixon. He just finishes in the top 8 about 99% of the time. Yes, I think he's better at Dixon's own game as far as getting the most out of the car. RamTX22 said, well, Joseph Potter or Colton don't get a car and a team that's as consistent as Palou's car and team, then the sky's the limit. Also true. I mean, Newgarden had high highs and low lows this year. Pato, that's kind of been the benchmark of his career. Colton Herta finally had a championship level season again for the first time in several years, and he was consistent which was kind of always one of the knocks on him, but he was very consistent. To me, the biggest challengers going into the next year, and of course we base it off what we saw this year for Palou, but it's Herta and it's McLaughlin, which means it'll be Newgarden and Dixon and Power fighting for the title next year, right? I mean,
right.
The stuff does not carry over from year to year.
Yeah, it's a good story and everything. When we talk about momentum and all that stuff, it doesn't seem to carry over.
And so we talked about Logan Sargent. Also, Haley Deegan was there. She's apparently looking at an Indy Lights ride as well. Let's see. There's a survey by an IndyCar fan behind Chains, Chains with a Z on the end. Basically just a IndyCar fan survey. So he posted this on Twitter. It's a Google Doc. You can fill that out. A good questionnaire. You had posted the TV ratings Exhibit A on why IndyCar wraps up the season so early. Poet Shevchenko said, I predict Nashville 2025 will be a home run both in attendance and TV. Yeah, when you're not competing with the NFL and in particular in market, the Tennessee Titans,
definitely
that's a huge boost.
And that's something I forgot to say. Considering the crowd we had on a Titans home weekend was very impressive. Not saying that people are necessarily going to the games, but want to watch the Titans.
Yes. So the crowd on hand was solid. Now, how many of those people were coming from Nashville? Not sure. And it helps that the Titans aren't any good.
But still early in the season.
Yes.
I mean, the energy for your home football team is pretty high.
Yeah, it still exists. S2000_Moose. Going dark for 6 months isn't the right reaction to this. If IndyCar could get steady 500,000 audiences through October and work that into their business plan, going dark smacks of hand-to-mouth enterprises is never going to grow. Well, 500,000 on cable, yeah, that's one thing. 500,000 on network is barely having a pulse. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's in terms of a business model, it doesn't make sense, and that's the thing is you're adding 3 more races potentially. Let's say that puts you to 20. What's that do to teams? There is no argument that somebody can give me that convinces me that it makes sense to go up against the NFL deep into the fall. I mean, into September even is kind of like, man, you got to get out the way.
Tyler_Allen said, biggest 2 hurdles are TV and proper marketing and promotion. No reason they couldn't race to late September.
Yes,
but the numbers back it up.
The numbers back it up. There's nobody watching.
This, from Bingles DFW, I think, encapsulates everything. Saying 100 emoji. I'm in 2 IndyCar fantasy leagues and travel to multiple IndyCar races each year. You can guess what I watched on Sunday. Yeah, he watched the Bengals.
Yeah, same with me. I watched the NFL. I mean, there's not enough people out there to care about IndyCar to make any sort of sense to go past early September.
And when your diehard fan base for an average network TV rating is right around 1 million in the summer, but you're getting below 500,000 on an NFL Sunday, that even tells me your diehards are watching it later or watching it on Peacock, which
right.
We're not going to get those numbers anyway.
You're going out with a whimper for your season.
Brady BC3 said, have your first race the week before the Super Bowl, as we talked about. Second race week after the Super Bowl. Have it lead into the Daytona 500. Shoot for 3 races a month over 7 months. I mean, that's 21 races. You're going to have to get a high-paying international race in there
right
to make that work. And also, how many network windows are you guaranteed on Fox a season? You know, because you have 19 network windows for 25. Is the contract up to 20? You know, how does that work? We talked about international races and an international swing and how that would work or not work.
Well, my thing too is it's easy to say add races. Even the early starting earlier, which both of us are for. Where are you racing? You tried Phoenix, that didn't work. TMS, not interested. Coda's not interested. Homestead doesn't seem to be interested. So where are these early season races that people want? I mean, that's the biggest thing. And St. Pete has either a pseudo or in writing guarantee that they're the first race of the season. So where are you racing? Are you starting your season? Do you say your international start in Mexico City and then you're going to St. Pete? I mean, it's easy even for us to say, yes, the season should start earlier. But where are these races? I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I feel like everywhere that at least in the United States, everywhere that wants IndyCar has a race. Can you name me a location or a track that is clamoring for IndyCar that doesn't have one, that is qualified to have IndyCar's race there?
IndyCar is more desperate than these tracks. That's the problem.
And that's what it comes back to. Everybody always mentioning
Milwaukee was the one that they had, and now they're at Milwaukee.
Right. Everybody's always mentioning about return to this place, that place. Like Watkins Glen, for example. Is Watkins Glen breaking down IndyCar's door to say we want IndyCar back? No. If they were, there probably would be a race there. So that's the thing. It always pushes back when people are like, well, you need to start early, go late. Where are these races, people? Where are these races? And you can't just say, well, Penske will fund them. No.
Supply and demand, and right now, IndyCar has supply, but they're not in demand. That's the issue. That's what it comes down to. A few other comments. We had a lot of entries on the mailbag this week. A couple on the Rahal news. Mom 2X over 2002 saying, and this is why 100 days needs to be all season or 365. We'll have an update on that in news and notes. Nick J. Fletcher saying, on behalf of the EPA, making sure they properly dispose of all lead they put in the cars on Fast Friday.
We had some funny comments with these.
A lot of good funny ones from this, and we have a tweet of the week nominee, a couple of tweet of the week nominees for that. Jeff Cerneski saying, judging by how RLL ran this year, someone stole the wrong intellectual property. Panko WSJ said, so they got Andretti's 2023 short oval set up? Yeah, because certainly not for this year. And then also I posted a poll, favorite non-Indy 500 race from this season. 36% of you said Milwaukee 1, 27% said Milwaukee 2, 19% Gateway, 17.5% said Nashville. A few votes for other. Hickey 93 said Barber should be there over Nashville. Correct answer is Milwaukee 2. Yeah, that was the one where I was like, do I put Barber on there? Do I put Nashville on there? But obviously, I think I was just a prisoner of the moment. Kojo 617 said, yeah, Barber just barely edging out Indy GP, saying sarcasm.
Funny.
As far as Indy GP. Elsewhere, Kyle Conley 59 said Barber was, in my opinion, Milwaukee race one of those options. Ed Joris said Long Beach. Brady BC3 said really enjoyed Toronto. And Tony Y25_ said, honestly, I think Gateway probably had the best racing. Terrible ending with Power Malukas crash. And then Joseph Newgarden controversy. Man, forgot about that. What a year.
What a season.
What a year. We had a lot. I mean, we had push to pass gate. We had
it just got more
the crazy restart. We had the Indy 500. So many things.
All the things. Yeah.
But that's a look at the mailbag. Okay, let's get into news and notes as we wrap things up. Hey, good news. IndyCar still evaluating what the opportunities are to bring a new video game to market. That from Racer.com. So no progress.
Yeah, that tells me nobody's interested in working with IndyCar.
Elsewhere, we had a couple of good nuggets from Jenna Fryer over the weekend. She said, on the pre-race grid, a source told me Mark Miles has already been to Mexico City to negotiate since the Pato Who fiasco 2 weeks ago. Also, speaking of McLaren, Zach Brown saying you will not see one reduction of any Aero sticker anywhere in our entire IndyCar organization. So I think that's someone who is stirring things. And if someone does not want to bet me, let me know because I'd like to bet them as far as the rumors Aero is stepping away from the sport. So also, this from Jenna Fryer. Again, a lot of good stuff here. Only time Alex Palou and Zach Brown have spoken during their breakup was at Long Beach at the Westin elevator. The doors open. Palou had to get in and ride 10 floors down with Zach Brown. But that was awkward.
A little bit.
Kyle Kirkwood says Logan Sargent looking for an IndyCar job. It said Prima Racing was not in play. So cross that one off for his good friend. And fishing and surfing and Florida beach life stuff. Because Kirkwood and Sargent are good friends.
Mm-hmm.
Also, and I forgot to mention this, but Will Power, first time he didn't win a pole in a season for the first time since 2008.
Yes.
Again, just wild.
16 years.
Wild.
It's a wild season all around. Can you imagine being in that elevator with like if I would, let's say it's at the 11th floor and I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to push 10 to get off, and then I'm going to push all the other buttons. So it's just a torturous ride down as the door keeps opening and closing for those two.
That would be fun. That would be fun indeed. Also, updates. Mark Miles says 100 days to Indy. They're open-minded about the future. That's not a good sign. So with the series changing this from Marshall Pruitt of Racer.com, how does this work as far as the co-production with the CW?
Very true.
Changes with that program. So the docuseries has been credited internally for adding 102,000 new viewers to IndyCar's races in 2024. Not bad. Those cited as individuals never watched an IndyCar race beforehand, viewed an episode of 100 Days to Indy in Season 2, went on to watch at least 2 races afterwards. Mark Miles wouldn't say whether 100 Days to Indy would continue. I thought Season 2 was really good outside the finale, where they just tried to cram too much into one episode.
I mean, when you're trying to do both Bumps Day and the race all together, it just doesn't work.
There was too much focus on the weather element and not enough on the on-track action for my liking. But again, these aren't IndyCar fans, so they're just gathering everything they see out there to try to put things together.
Is there anything, real quick, is there anything that gets IndyCar fans more nervous than starting a sentence off with Mark Miles says?
Probably not.
I think it could be like a meme of some sort. Is every time somebody starts with Mark Miles says or Mark Miles said, you'd be like, oh, here we go.
That's a very valid point. It's concerning anytime that happens. Let's see what else on news and notes. GM's Eric Warren said the manufacturer had positive meetings last week regarding the future of its F1 entry, adding, "We will continue to go through the process," again, working with Andretti in that F1 bid. So I guess good news there. Elsewhere, Firestone and IndyCar will stay together. Long-term extension for the 2025 season and beyond, basically through the decade is the understanding for this one. Never felt like they were going to shop around anyway, but that just confirms it. And a couple other quick notes. The A.J. Foyt biography book is available now on Octane Press. Congrats to Marco Andretti. Mira, Micah Andretti, his daughter born earlier this week. So congrats to him and Billy and baby, all doing well. And then NBC wrapped up their coverage, a nice video tribute that Lee Diffie voiced over the course of NBC's coverage. Yes, they had the NASCAR graphics snafus.
Yeah, we didn't mention that, did we?
Coming, was it going to break or coming out of break?
The one I saw was going to break.
I saw it twice.
Okay.
But yes, there was that. But overall, and the second half of the season, once Fox got the future rights, there are little production things. I never felt like on air was lacking in terms of quality.
No, I agree.
But just little production things, slip-ups, and obviously getting bumped around because of...
Not ideal, going on CNBC.
Yeah, going on CNBC and things like that. But overall, a great partner for IndyCar for all these years, and hopefully Fox can exceed what NBC did over the last decade plus.
I think it's fair to say that NBC exceeded what ABC was able to do.
Without a doubt.
And the hope now is Fox takes an approach to exceed what NBC was able to do.
All right, time for tweets of the week. And we have a couple to get to. Let's see. First one is OBX Jody. In honor of David Letterman, can we put out a top 10 list of things not found in the RLL raid? And then this from Connor Daly. He quote tweeted Adam Stern's tweet about the FBI investigation and said, "Seems like an aggressive way to try to get to the bottom of where Alexander Rossi is driving next year. Even Bobby Rahal found that funny." I think he replied, "Good one, Connor." So
did see that. I think one thing you can say you won't find or the FBI didn't find at RLL, the raid, is any recent race trophies.
Brutal.
Brutal. Sorry.
I think Bobby deleted that tweet, FYI.
Oh, back to Connor?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, come on.
Which is not a surprise given the situation.
One race win since 2020 from Christian Lundgaard.
Yeah. It's been tough. Yeah, he did delete that, which rightfully so because of the investigation. I understand.
Yeah,
but it was
fun.
fun.
Yeah, have to put the muzzle on.
Anything that we missed?
I don't think so. I think we wrapped up the season. The championship went to the guy that we thought was going to win it 7-8 races ago. We were pretty confident in saying that. And now we enter an off season that hopefully keeps us entertained for all the right reasons, not the wrong reasons.
Yes. All right, let's get to our random split era driver of the week.
All right, we're going back to the fertile ground that is late Champ Car and 2005 and going with Jorge Goders.
Who?
Jorge Goders is a Mexican race car driver. He actually currently competes full-time in the NASCAR Mexico Series, but in terms of his open wheel experience was a one-off for PKV Racing.
That
was with Craig Pollock, I think.
And then
Pollock,
Kevin Kalkoven, and then Jimmy Vassar.
Correct. That was 2005, a one-off at Monterrey, Mexico. So it makes sense. Mexican driver, one-off in Mexico. Finished 18th in that 2005 race. He actually did full-time in Indy Lights for Quaker State Team Go.
Ooh.
Back in the day. Finished 16th in the 1998 Indy Lights season. Had a best finish of 5th at Gateway in 1998 in Indy Lights. After he was done with IndyCar in that one shot in kart, he got into a lot of NASCAR, raced some Nextel Cup, raced some Busch Series races, but then got into more of the regional scene with the Corona Series and Toyota Series and stuff like that. So overall, had a couple of top 10s over 10 years in Xfinity. His last race in NASCAR was the 2007 race at the Glen. But in terms of IndyCar and or open wheel racing, just did that one season. He announced that he would drive in 2006 for a new team in the Busch Series, Latin American Racing. The team never became a reality. So he still did a handful of races in the Busch Series with some funding, but also did some ARCA racing in 2006. He was a road course ringer in 2007, but never came back to open wheel racing after that. So one and done, Monterrey, Mexico. Jorge Goders, this week's random split era driver of the week.
All right, that does it for us. Next week, our first full off-season episode. We'll hopefully have more clarity on this FBI raid and perhaps some more silly season rumors and driver announcements as well. For Justin Kinney, I'm Caleb Batch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.